Velkanos had been security chief of Kepler Station for 23 years. In all that time, he had overseen hundreds of diplomatic meetings, trade negotiations, and cultural exchanges. The station was designed to be neutral ground where any species could meet safely, regardless of their biological requirements or social customs. The massive structure rotated slowly in space, generating artificial gravity for the dozens of different species that called it home. Environmental zones were carefully controlled to accommodate beings who breathed everything from oxygen to methane to pure energy. Velkanos took pride in the fact that no security incident had ever occurred during his tenure. Today was special. The new species called humans were arriving for their formal induction ceremony. Velkanos had read the preliminary reports and found them encouraging. The humans seemed peaceful and intelligent, with strong social bonds and cooperative instincts. They would fit well into Confederation society. The human delegation arrived in a sleek ship that showed impressive engineering for such a young species. Admiral Lisa Carter led the group, along with scientist Dr. Kevin Brooks and a small support staff. Velkanos met them at the docking bay, noting their curious expressions as they looked around the station. "Welcome to Kepler Station," Velkanos said through the universal translator. His species, the Morvani, communicated primarily through scent and electromagnetic pulses. But the translation system converted his thoughts into audible speech. Admiral Carter stepped forward. She was tall for a human, with short brown hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in every detail of her surroundings. "Thank you for having us. This is incredible. We never imagined anything like this existed." Dr. Brooks, a younger human with eager mannerisms, pointed at the transparent aluminum walls that showed the station's interior. "The engineering here is remarkable. How do you maintain structural integrity with so many different atmospheric zones?" Velkanos found himself impressed by their quick grasp of technical concepts. Most new species took weeks to understand basic station operations, but the humans were asking sophisticated questions within minutes of arrival. The formal ceremonies began the next day. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Great Hall to welcome Earth into galactic civilization. The humans sat with obvious fascination as each species presented gifts and shared cultural exchanges. The Zenthari offered advanced medical technology. The Vorthanians shared artistic holographic projections that defied imagination. The crystalline Seknari demonstrated their ability to grow living architecture from pure thought. Each presentation was met with enthusiastic questions from the human delegation. "Your species seems remarkably adaptable," commented Ambassador Kulix Tai of the hegemony. "Most new members require extensive cultural adjustment periods." Admiral Carter smiled. "Humans have always been good at adapting. We had to be, growing up on Earth." The ceremonies continued into the evening. Velkanos monitored everything from Bay, the security center, pleased with how smoothly events were proceeding. The humans were integrating better than any new species he had seen. They showed genuine interest in every culture they encountered and seemed to instinctively understand diplomatic protocols. Everything changed at 2347 station time. The alarm started as a low hum that quickly escalated to an urgent wail. Velkanos's communication board lit up with emergency signals from across the station. He quickly identified the source, a containment breach in the Zephyrian delegation quarters. The Zephyrians were a gas-based species that communicated through controlled chemical emissions. During their cultural presentation, something had gone wrong with their atmospheric containment suits. Instead of their normal harmless vapor trails, They were releasing concentrated neurotoxins into the station's air supply. Velkanos activated emergency protocols immediately. Blast doors sealed contaminated sections. Emergency life support systems began pumping clean air into unaffected areas. Evacuation procedures started for all species vulnerable to the toxins. The neurotoxin was particularly deadly to oxygen-breathing species like the Altarians. Within minutes, reports came in of beings collapsing in contaminated zones. The medical bay was overwhelmed with casualties as more beings succumbed to the invisible poison. Velkanos coordinated rescue efforts from the security center, but the situation was dire. Standard procedure was to abandon contaminated areas until the toxins could be neutralized. That process would take hours, and many beings would die before then. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of evacuating like every other species, the humans moved toward the contaminated zones. Dr. Brooks appeared on the security monitors, wearing an improvised breathing apparatus made from a Zenthari medical mask and what looked like a human shirt wrapped around his face. "What are they doing?" Velkanos muttered, watching in disbelief as more humans appeared in the contaminated areas. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system. "Dr. Brooks thinks he can neutralize the toxin. We need access to engineering sections 7 through 12. "Negative," Velkanos replied immediately. "Those areas are contaminated. You'll be dead within minutes." "We'll take that risk," Carter responded. "We have people trapped in there." Velkanos watched the security feeds in growing amazement as the humans split into teams. Some headed for the engineering sections with improvised protective gear. Others moved into contaminated areas to search for survivors. Dr. Brooks and engineer Tony Rivera worked frantically in Engineering Section 9, pulling components from 3 different alien systems. Velkanos had no idea what they were trying to build, but they worked with a focus and determination he had never seen before. Meanwhile, Commander Amy Johnson led a rescue team through corridors filled with deadly gas. They carried unconscious aliens to safety, taking turns holding their breath for impossible periods of time. When their improvised breathing gear failed, they simply wrapped more cloth around their faces and continued working. "This is insane," Velkanos said to his deputy. "They should be dead already." His deputy, a logical Volnari, checked the contamination readings. The toxin concentration in those areas would kill most species in under 5 minutes. The humans have been working in there for over an hour. Dr. Brooks's voice came through the communication system, strained but determined. "I think we've got it. Initiating atmospheric scrubber in 3, 2, 1. The jury-rigged device the humans had built from alien components hummed to life. Within minutes, contamination readings began dropping throughout the affected areas. The improvised atmospheric scrubber was actually working, but the humans didn't stop there. Even as the air cleared, they continued working. Amy Johnson and her team searched every contaminated room for survivors. Dr. Brooks and Tony Rivera improved their scrubber design and built 2 more units to clear the air faster. They worked for 18 straight hours. Velkanos watched them through the security monitors, expecting them to collapse from exhaustion. Instead, they seemed to draw energy from the crisis itself. When one human became too tired to continue, another would take their place without being asked. By the time the crisis was over, the humans had saved over 3,000 alien lives. They had neutralized a toxin that should have killed them, built atmospheric scrubbers from incompatible alien technology, and mounted rescue operations in conditions that should have been fatal. Velkanos found Admiral Carter in the medical bay. where she was helping treat rescued aliens. She looked exhausted but alert, as if she was ready to keep working if needed. "How?" was all Velkanos could manage to ask. Carter looked confused. "How what? How did you survive in those contaminated areas? How did you build those scrubbers? How did you work for 18 hours without rest?" Carter shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed both modesty and confidence. "We did what needed to be done. People were in danger." Later, in his security report, Velkanos struggled to describe what he had witnessed. The humans had displayed physical capabilities that defied understanding. They had solved technical problems that should have taken teams of specialists weeks to figure out. Most importantly, they had risked their own lives without hesitation to save complete strangers. But what disturbed Velkanos most was not what the humans had done, but how they had done it. They had treated the entire crisis as if it was normal, as if risking their lives to save others was simply what any reasonable being would do. He filed his report with a recommendation that human capabilities be studied more carefully before full Confederation membership was granted. Something about their response to the crisis suggested that these peaceful, cooperative beings might be more dangerous than anyone realized. Zixathara's 4 eyes moved across the glowing screen in her private quarters aboard the Confederation flagship. The data scrolled past in neat lines of text that would have made most beings dizzy, but her species had evolved to process multiple information streams at once. What she read made her pause and lean back in her chair. The scout reports from the Rim worlds always contained something interesting, but this was different. A new species had been discovered on a small blue planet they called Earth. The beings there called themselves humans, and they were close to achieving faster than light travel. This alone was not unusual. The galaxy was vast, and new species were found every few decades. What made Zixathara pause was the preliminary biological data. These humans were remarkably sturdy for such a young species. Their bone density was nearly twice that of most galactic races. Their muscle fibers were dense and efficient. Their cardiovascular system could function under extreme stress for extended periods. Even their healing rates were impressive. The preliminary scout had noted that humans seemed to recover from injuries that would cripple most species within days rather than months. They also appeared to have an unusual tolerance for pain and physical discomfort. The scout had observed human construction workers laboring in conditions that would require environmental suits for most galactic species. Zixathara made notes in the margins of the report. The humans appeared to have evolved on what the scouts termed a death world, a planet with extreme weather, dangerous predators, and countless natural disasters. Most species that evolved under such conditions either died out or became so. Aggressive, they destroyed themselves before achieving spaceflight. But these humans were different. They had survived their hostile world and were now reaching for the stars. Their preliminary communications intercepts showed they had concepts of art, music, literature, and complex social structures. They seemed to value cooperation and had formed large, peaceful societies. The door to her quarters chimed softly. Zixathara looked up as High Counselor Morthek entered. His tall, graceful form moved with the dignity of his species, the Altarians. His skin had the pale blue tint that indicated he was in a thoughtful mood. "You have read the reports about the humans," Morthek said. It was not a question. He settled into the chair across from her desk with fluid movements. "I have," Zixathara replied. "They are fascinating, strong for their size, intelligent and apparently peaceful, despite their harsh origins. Morthek nodded slowly. The Council has decided to make first contact. We will use the standard protocols. A small fleet will approach their system and request a meeting with their leaders. Zixthara felt a flutter of excitement. First contact events were rare and important. The last new species to join the Confederation had been the gas-dwelling Vorthanians nearly 50 years ago. Who will lead the contact team? Captain Veltanos of the Diplomatic Corps, Morthek said. We want this to go smoothly. Humans seem promising. Their technology is advancing rapidly, and they appear to have the social stability needed for Confederation membership. Zixthara turned back to her screen and pulled up the cultural analysis. Human society was complex but seemed to value individual freedom while maintaining social cooperation. They had eliminated large-scale warfare on their planet nearly 2 centuries ago, though the reports noted they still maintained military forces for what they called peacekeeping purposes. There is something else, Zixthara said, highlighting a section of the biological report. Their physical capabilities are unusual. The scouts estimate that an average human could overpower most galactic species in direct physical confrontation. Morthek's skin shifted to a lighter shade of blue. That is concerning, but not unprecedented. The Kethmori were physically powerful, as well, and they integrated successfully after diplomatic conditioning. The Kethmori had been the last warrior species to join the Confederation. They had required extensive cultural adjustment to suppress their violent instincts, but now they served as excellent engineers and architects. Their aggressive nature had been channeled into competitive sports and artistic expression. Yes, Zixthara agreed. But the Kethmori were obviously predatory. Humans appear to be omnivores with predatory ancestry, but they have developed herbivore-like social cooperation. It is an unusual combination. Morthek stood and moved to the large window that showed the stars streaming past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. Perhaps that combination is what allowed them to survive their hostile world while remaining civilized. We should view it as a strength rather than a concern. 3 weeks later, Zixthara stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system. The system was typical for a developing species: one inhabited world, several gas giants, and an asteroid belt that showed signs of early mining operations. The humans detected them almost immediately. Their sensor technology was more advanced than expected for such a young species. Within hours, a transmission came from the third planet. The face that appeared on the screen was unmistakably alien, yet strangely familiar. The human had 2 eyes, set in a symmetrical face, with features that suggested intelligence and curiosity rather than aggression. He spoke in what the translation systems identified as English, one of their primary languages. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Command," the human said. "We welcome you to our solar system. We have been hoping for this day for a long time." Captain Veltanos stepped forward. His species, the Zenthari, were known for their diplomatic skills and calming presence. "Greetings, Captain Morrison. I am Captain Veltanos of the Galactic Confederation. We come in peace and friendship." The initial conversations went well. The humans were curious about galactic civilization and eager to learn. They asked intelligent questions about Confederation technology, culture, and governance. Captain Morrison explained that Earth had been monitoring space for signs of intelligent life for over a century. "We always hoped we were not alone," Morrison said during one of their conversations. "Finding out that there is an entire galactic community is beyond our wildest dreams." Zixthera watched the exchanges with growing optimism. The humans seemed ideal candidates for Confederation membership. They were intelligent, curious, and appeared to have the social maturity needed for galactic citizenship. The formal invitation was extended after a week of preliminary talks. The humans were invited to send a delegation to Kepler Station, a neutral facility used for first contact ceremonies and diplomatic meetings. There they would meet representatives from dozens of species and begin the process of joining galactic civilization. Captain Morrison accepted on behalf of his species with obvious excitement. "We would be honored to attend," he said. "I will inform our government immediately. This is the greatest day in human history." As the human ship departed to carry the news back to Earth, Zixthera felt satisfied with the mission's success. The humans would make excellent additions to the Confederation. They were physically robust enough to work in challenging environments, intelligent enough to contribute to galactic science and culture, and social enough to integrate well with other species. She made final notes in her report, recommending fast-track processing for human membership. There was no reason to delay their integration into galactic society. They appeared to be exactly what the Confederation needed: a young, energetic species with fresh perspectives and useful capabilities. Looking back, Zixthera would later realize that this moment represented the end of an era. The galaxy was about to discover what it meant to invite a species of survivors into their peaceful civilization. But in that moment, watching the human ship accelerate toward their home world, she felt only optimism for the future. Dr. Kix had been the chief medical officer of the Confederation Health Authority for 47 years. In that time, he had dealt with plagues, biological weapons, and medical emergencies across hundreds of worlds. His species, the Helixani, were known throughout the galaxy for their medical expertise and logical approach to biological problems. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for the humans. 6 months after their induction into the Confederation, humans had established colonies on 12 worlds and seemed to be thriving in galactic society. Captain Stephen Walsh commanded the UES Pioneer, the first human-crewed exploration vessel, which had already made several significant discoveries. Dr. Claire Thompson headed a joint research initiative on Proxima Base that was producing remarkable results. The humans appeared to be model Confederation members. They were cooperative, curious, and contributed valuable insights to galactic science. Their physical resilience made them excellent candidates for dangerous research missions and frontier colonization. Dr. Kix had been impressed by their medical knowledge and their intuitive understanding of biological systems. That impression changed when the distress signal arrived from Hadara 7. Dr. Kix was reviewing medical reports in his office aboard the Confederation hospital ship when the emergency alert flashed across his screen. A containment breach at the research colony on Hadara 7 had released something called the Crimson Plague. The name made Dr. Kixvalon's 3 hearts skip beats. The Crimson Plague was a biological weapon created by the extinct Vexnari civilization. It had been discovered in ancient ruins 20 years ago and was considered one of the most dangerous biological agents known to Confederation science. The plague was engineered to be a perfect killer. It adapted to any species' biology within hours, attacking both immune systems and nervous systems simultaneously. No known treatment existed. Infected beings died within 6 to 12 hours, depending on their species' natural resilience. Standard protocol for a Crimson Plague outbreak was immediate planetary sterilization. The risk of spread was too great to allow any possibility of escape. Dr. Kix Valon immediately dispatched his fastest ship to Hadara 7 to oversee the evacuation and sterilization procedures. When he arrived at the planet, he expected to find either a dead world or evacuation ships preparing to flee. Instead, he found something impossible. The human research team was still on the planet, and they were still alive. Dr. Claire Thompson met him at the landing bay of the research station. She looked tired and stressed, but she was clearly not dying from the plague. Behind her, Dr. Kix Valon could see other humans moving around the facility, working at various tasks. "Dr. Thompson," Dr. Kix Valon said through his translator, "you need to evacuate immediately. This facility is contaminated with the Crimson Plague." Dr. Thompson nodded. "We know. The breach occurred 36 hours ago. We've been working on a solution." Dr. Kix Valon felt confusion wash over him. "A solution? There is no solution. The plague is invariably fatal. You should all be dead already." "We're not, though," said microbiologist Danny Foster, approaching with a data pad in his hands. "And we think we know why." Dr. Kix Valon followed, them into the research facility, his medical sensors detecting trace amounts of plague organisms in the air. The concentration was low but definitely present. These humans were breathing contaminated air and somehow remaining alive. "Show me your data," Dr. Kix Valon said. Dr. Thompson led him to a laboratory where biochemist Patricia Lewis was working at a molecular analysis station. The equipment around her was a mixture of Confederation technology and improvised human modifications. "The plague adapts to each species differently," Patricia explained. "It analyzes the target's immune system and nervous system, then creates specific attack vectors. But human immune systems are unusual." She brought up a holographic display showing plague organisms interacting with human cells. "We have something called an adaptive immune response. When the plague tries to analyze our systems, our immune systems fight back and adapt to the plague at the same time." Dr. Kix Valon studied the data in disbelief. "This is impossible. No species has immune systems that can adapt faster than the plague can analyze them." "Humans do," Danny Foster said simply. "We evolved on a world with constantly changing pathogens. Our immune systems had to become extremely adaptable to survive." Dr. Kix Valon watched the molecular interactions on the screen. The human immune system was doing something he had never seen before. Instead of being overwhelmed by the plague's adaptive capabilities, it was learning from each attack and developing countermeasures. "Even if your immune systems can resist the plague," Dr. Kix Valon said, "you cannot cure it. The organisms are too complex, too adaptable." Dr. Thompson smiled grimly. "We're not trying to cure it in the traditional sense. We're teaching it to cure itself." She led him to another laboratory where more humans were working. Dr. Kix Valon counted 12 researchers, all of whom should have been dead hours ago. They were working with a focus and intensity he had rarely seen, even in his own species. "The plague adapts to attack immune systems," Patricia Lewis explained. "But what if we give it immune systems that want to be attacked? We're creating modified human immune cells that will trigger the plague's adaptation response, but in a way that makes it harmless." Dr. Kix Valon's logical mind struggled to process what he was hearing. "You are deliberately exposing yourselves to the plague to study how it works?" "Some of us are," Danny Foster admitted. "We're taking turns being test subjects. The plague affects each person slightly differently, so we need multiple data points." "That is insane," Dr. Kix Valon said. "You could all die." "We could," Dr. Thompson agreed. "But if we don't try, everyone on this planet dies anyway, and the plague might spread to other worlds." Dr. Kixvalon spent the next 24 hours observing the human research team. What he saw defied everything he knew about medicine, biology, and basic survival instincts. The humans had implemented what they called emergency research protocols. Teams worked in shifts around the clock, with some members deliberately exposing themselves to controlled amounts of the plague to study its effects. When one researcher became too sick to continue, another would take their place. They jury-rigged equipment, modified Confederation medical technology, and created entirely new research methodologies on the spot. Most remarkably, they seemed to view their situation as a challenging puzzle rather than a death sentence. 72 hours after the initial outbreak, Dr. Thompson called Dr. Kixvalon to the main laboratory. She looked exhausted, but triumphant. "We have it," she announced, "both a cure and a vaccine." Dr. Kixvalon examined their work with growing amazement. The humans had not only developed a treatment for the Crimson Plague, they had created a way to immunize other species against it. The solution was elegant and should have taken years to develop with full Confederation research teams. How? Was all Dr. Kixvalon could ask. Dr. Thompson shrugged. A gesture he was learning was characteristically human. "We did what we always do when faced with a problem. We refused to give up until we solved it." Later, as Dr. Kixvalon prepared his report on the incident, he struggled to find words to describe what he had witnessed. The humans had not just survived an impossible situation, they had treated it as a normal work assignment. Their immune systems were unlike anything in Confederation medical databases. Their problem-solving abilities seemed to improve under pressure rather than deteriorate. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to consider sacrificing their own lives for research data to be a reasonable professional choice. Dr. Kixvalon filed his report with a recommendation that human medical capabilities be classified and studied carefully. He had the uncomfortable feeling that the Confederation had invited something unprecedented into their peaceful galaxy. The humans called their approach emergency medicine. Dr. Kixvalon suspected it might more accurately be called weaponized determination. Either way, it was clear that humanity's definition of impossible was very different from the rest of the galaxies. Fleet Commander Sekthar of the Hegemony had been a warrior for 63 years. His cybernetic enhancements allowed him to process tactical data faster than any organic mind, while his natural Kethmori aggression made him one of the most feared military leaders in known space. The Hegemony had left Confederation space 2 centuries ago, disgusted by what they saw as weakness and pacifism. They believed that strength was the only true virtue, and that the Confederation's peaceful ways would eventually lead to stagnation and decay. Under the leadership of Warlord Krextor, they had built a militant society based on honor, combat, and the pursuit of power. When reports reached Hegemony space about the new species called humans, Sekthar had been intrigued. Initial intelligence suggested they were physically powerful and surprisingly capable. The incident at Kepler Station and the plague cure on Hadara 7 indicated that humans might be natural warriors disguised as peaceful scientists. These humans could be valuable allies, Krextor had said during their strategic meeting. They clearly have warrior instincts hidden beneath their diplomatic facade. We should recruit them before the Confederation corrupts them completely. Sekthar had agreed. Humans seemed like a species that would understand the Hegemony's philosophy once they saw true strength in action. The plan was simple. Demonstrate Hegemony power by attacking a human colony, then offer them the choice between destruction and alliance. The target was New Terra, a recently established human colony in a disputed border region. Intelligence reports indicated it was defended by only a small garrison and a handful of patrol ships. It would be an easy victory that would impress the humans without causing significant casualties. Sekthar assembled a fleet of 500 ships for the operation. It was massive overkill for such a small target, but the display of power was intended to be persuasive rather than practical. When the humans saw the overwhelming force arrayed against them, they would surely recognize the futility of resistance and join the stronger side. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Terra system to find exactly what intelligence had predicted. The colony was a modest settlement on a pleasant world, with basic orbital defenses and a small fleet of patrol vessels. Sekthar counted 12 human ships, mostly converted exploration vessels and cargo haulers. "This is Fleet Commander Sekthar of the Hegemony," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and we will discuss terms for your integration into our organization." The response came from Colonel Frank Davis, the garrison commander. His image appeared on the main screen, showing a middle-aged human with gray hair and calm eyes. "This is Colonel Davis of the New Terra Defense Force. You are not welcome here. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Sekthar felt a moment of confusion. Either the human was bluffing or he genuinely did not understand the tactical situation. "Colonel Davis, you have 12 ships, I have 500. Resistance is futile." Colonel Davis's expression did not change. "We have 12 ships today, Commander. How many will you have tomorrow?" The response puzzled Sekthar, but he proceeded with the attack. The first wave of hegemony ships moved toward the human positions, expecting to overwhelm them quickly. Standard tactics called for a massive display of firepower, followed by demands for surrender. What happened instead defied all tactical logic. The human ships did not retreat or cluster together for defense. Instead, they spread out and began moving, in seemingly random patterns. Sekthar's targeting systems had difficulty maintaining locks as the human vessels shifted between offensive and defensive postures with unpredictable timing. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human ships are not following standard defensive protocols. They appear to be implementing individual combat strategies rather than coordinated fleet actions." Sekthar watched the battle unfold with growing confusion. Each human ship was fighting differently, as if 12 separate commanders were making independent decisions. This should have made them easier to defeat, but instead, it made them impossible to predict. Captain Danny Morris, commanding a converted cargo hauler, somehow managed to disable a hegemony cruiser by ramming it at exactly the right angle to collapse its shield generators. Major Katie Sullivan led a boarding party that captured 3 enemy ships from the inside, using tactics that no military academy taught. "How are they doing this?" Sekthar demanded, watching his fleet status reports with disbelief. "Sir, the humans appear to be adapting their tactics in real time," his tactical officer replied. "Every time we counter one of their strategies, they switch to something completely different." The battle continued for 6 hours. Sekthar watched his overwhelming numerical advantage slowly erode as human forces demonstrated an alarming ability to turn every setback into an opportunity. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as missiles. When their ships were damaged, they used the debris as improvised weapons. Most disturbing of all, they never retreated. Even when facing impossible odds, even when their ships were falling apart around them, the humans kept fighting. They seemed to view surrender as simply not an option. "Sir," came an urgent report from the battleship Conquest, "we're being boarded. The humans are cutting through our hull with some kind of improvised plasma torch. Sekthar switched to the Conquest's internal cameras and watched in amazement as human soldiers moved through the ship's corridors. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they advanced with methodical determination, turning every corner into a defensive position and every corridor into a trap. "Sir, the flagship Dominion is reporting critical damage," another officer announced. "A human fighter somehow penetrated their main hangar and detonated something inside." Sekthar checked the tactical display and felt a cold realization wash over him. Despite having a 40-1 numerical advantage, his fleet was losing. Not just losing ships, but losing the battle itself. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting because fighting was what they did. They turned every disadvantage into a weapon, every setback into a new strategy, every impossible situation into an opportunity for creativity. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving surrender demands from the human commander." Sekthar stared at the display showing his battered fleet. In 6 hours, the humans had destroyed or disabled over 200 hegemony ships. Their own losses were catastrophic in percentage terms. They had lost 9 of their 12 ships, but they were still fighting with the remaining 3. Colonel Davis appeared on the main screen again, his expression unchanged from the beginning of the battle. "Commander Sekthar, you are now outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender and withdraw, or we will be forced to continue this demonstration." For the first time in his 63 years as a warrior, Sekthar felt genuine fear. Not fear of death, which he had accepted long ago, but fear of something he did not understand. The humans had not just defeated his fleet, they had done it, while treating the entire battle as if it was routine. "All ships," Sekthar ordered, "withdraw to hyperspace jump points. Execute retreat protocol." As the hegemony fleet limped away from New Terra, Sekthar tried to process what had happened. His species prided itself on warrior culture and combat excellence, but the humans had fought like nothing he had ever seen before. They had not fought with honor or glory or any of the noble concepts that motivated hegemony warriors. They had fought with a cold, practical determination that made combat seem like just another job that needed to be done. In his report to Warlord Krextor, Sekthar struggled to explain the defeat. How could he describe a species that treated impossible odds as normal working conditions? How could he convey the terrifying efficiency with which humans turned every aspect of battle into a weapon? "Sir," he finally wrote, "recommend immediate cessation of contact with human space. These beings do not fight to win. They fight because surrender is not programmed into their species. They are not warriors in any sense we understand. They are something far more dangerous." For the first time in hegemony history, a fleet commander was recommending retreat from a numerically inferior enemy. But Sekthar knew that numbers meant nothing to a species that refused to acknowledge the concept of defeat. High Counselor Morthek stood before the vast observation window in his private chambers, watching the gentle rotation of Confederation Central Station. In his 140 years of life, he had overseen the peaceful expansion of galactic civilization across thousands of worlds. The Confederation represented everything his species valued: cooperation, diplomacy, and the pursuit of knowledge over conflict. Now, for the first time in his long career, Morthek felt genuinely afraid. The reports had been flooding in for weeks, from across human space, and each one painted a more disturbing picture than the last. Word of humanity's military capabilities at New Terra had spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire, but it was not admiration that followed in its wake. It was fear. Ambassador Kulixatai of the Hegemony had requested an emergency meeting just days after their failed attack on New Terra. The proud warrior species that had left Confederation space centuries ago now sought protection from the very organization they had once dismissed as weak. "They are not warriors," Kulixtai had said, his normally confident demeanor replaced by something approaching panic. "Warriors fight for honor, for glory, for conquest. These humans fight because fighting is what they do. They do not seek victory. They simply refuse to accept defeat." Similar reports came from across the galaxy. Merchant Captain Ryan Hayes had single-handedly dismantled a pirate organization that had terrorized shipping lanes for decades. When captured, he had talked his way out of captivity, then systematically hunted down every ship in the pirate fleet. Not for revenge or profit, but because pirates are bad for business. Dr. Helen Garcia had solved a centuries-old archaeological puzzle by thinking like the extinct warrior race that created it. Her approach had been so alien to peaceful galactic thinking that no Confederation scientist had ever considered it. She had asked herself not, "What would a civilized being do?" but, "What would someone willing to kill do?" Diplomat Nicole Wright had negotiated peace between two species by showing them combat footage from Earth's history. Instead of appealing to their better nature, she had demonstrated the consequences of warfare with such clinical precision that both sides had agreed to any terms rather than risk similar destruction. The pattern was clear, and it terrified Morthek. Humanity's greatest strengths, their resilience, creativity, and protective instincts all stemmed from millions of years of evolutionary warfare. They were not good at violence despite being civilized. They were civilized because they had become so good at violence that they had been forced to find alternatives. Emergency sessions had been called across Confederation space. The Altarian Council demanded immediate action to contain the human threat. The Zenthari Diplomatic Corps suggested peaceful isolation protocols. The logical Volnari presented detailed analyses proving that humans were fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. "They are apex predators pretending to be herbivores," declared Senator Vexdan of the Outer Colonies. "How long before they decide that the galaxy needs to be reorganized according to their preferences?" Morthek reviewed the psychological profiles that had been hastily compiled by Confederation scientists. Human behavior patterns showed troubling inconsistencies with known peaceful species. They formed strong emotional bonds with other beings, but those same protective instincts could trigger violent responses if their allies were threatened. They had eliminated warfare on their own planet, but they had done so through a process of escalating conflict that culminated in weapons capable of destroying their entire world. Peace had come not from philosophical evolution, but from the practical realization that the alternative was extinction. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to consider their own history normal. When questioned about their violent past, humans spoke of war and conflict as natural aspects of social development. They had no understanding of how their casual acceptance of violence appeared to species that had evolved peaceful cooperation. The communication panel in Morthek's chambers chimed softly. His aide, a young Altarian named Silvek, entered with obvious nervousness. "Sir, we have received formal requests from 17 member species for emergency protection protocols," Silvek reported. "They are requesting Confederation fleet protection from potential human aggression." Morthek felt his heart sink. The Confederation had been founded on the principle that all intelligent species could coexist peacefully. The idea that member worlds would need protection from another member species was antithetical to everything they had built. "What about the humans themselves?" Morthek asked. "What is their response to these concerns?" Sylvek consulted his data pad. "Ambassador Carter has requested a meeting to address what she calls misunderstandings about human intentions. She seems genuinely confused by the negative reactions her species has received. That was perhaps the most frightening aspect of the entire situation. The humans appeared to be completely unaware of how they were perceived by the rest of the galaxy. They saw themselves as helpful, cooperative members of galactic society. They could not understand why their willingness to fight when necessary was viewed as threatening rather than reassuring." Morthek turned from the observation window and activated his personal communication system. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Dr. Zixathera, the intelligence officer who had written the original contact report on humanity. "Doctor," Morthek said, "I need your assessment. Are humans a threat to galactic peace?" Zixathera's expression was troubled. "That is the wrong question, High Counselor. Humans are not threatening anyone. They are simply being themselves. The problem is that being themselves includes capabilities and instincts that no other species possesses." "Explain." "We have spent 800 years creating a galaxy where conflict is resolved through negotiation and compromise," Zixathera said. "We eliminated warfare by making violence so unthinkable that most species have forgotten it ever existed. But humans never forgot. They carry the knowledge of war in their genetic memory." Morthek pondered this analysis. "Are you suggesting that humans will inevitably become aggressive?" "No," Zixathera replied. "I am suggesting that humans will inevitably be effective. Whether they use that effectiveness for good or ill depends on circumstances we cannot control. And that uncertainty is what frightens everyone." The truth of her words settled heavily on Morthek's shoulders. The galaxy had become accustomed to predictable, peaceful species with limited capabilities for harm. Humans represented something unprecedented, a species with overwhelming capacity for violence that genuinely preferred peace. But preference was not the same as nature. If humans were ever pushed too far, if their protective instincts were triggered, if they decided that galactic civilization was not worth preserving, there was nothing the Confederation could do to stop them. A soft chime indicated another incoming message. This one was from Captain Jake Morrison, the human officer who had made first contact with Confederation forces. His message was brief and direct. "High Counselor Morthek, we understand that our recent actions have caused concern among Confederation members. We want to assure you that humanity has no aggressive intentions toward any galactic species. We simply want to be good citizens and contribute to galactic civilization. However, we will defend ourselves and our allies if threatened. We hope this clarifies our position." Morthek read the message twice, noting the casual way Morrison mentioned defending allies. Humans had formed bonds across dozens of species in just months of Confederation membership. Their protective instincts now extended far beyond their own species. Late that night, as Morthek prepared his recommendations for the Emergency Council session, he found himself thinking about evolution and survival. The Confederation had created a peaceful galaxy by selecting for cooperation and eliminating aggressive traits. They had built a civilization of sheep, and now they had invited wolves to join their flock. The irony was that the wolves seemed to genuinely want to protect the sheep. Humans showed every sign of being loyal Confederation members who would sacrifice themselves to defend galactic civilization. but they would define defense in ways that no other species could imagine or control. Morthek completed his report with a heavy heart. His recommendation would shock the Council, but it was the only logical conclusion. Humanity could not be contained, controlled, or expelled. They were already too integrated into galactic society. The Confederation would have to adapt to accommodate a species that redefined the very concept of civilized behavior. In his final notes, Morthek wrote, "We spent 800 years teaching the galaxy to be sheep. Then we invited the wolves to dinner. Now we must hope that the wolves choose to remain vegetarian." As he sealed the report and prepared for transmission, Morthek looked out at the peaceful station around him and wondered how long it would remain that way. The galaxy had found humanity, and humanity had found the galaxy. Neither would ever be the same again.